The Niners made a couple moves in the last week. They added Shakel Brown, who really looked impressive physically at the minicamp. He's a second-year defensive tackle from Troy who hurt his ankle in the preseason last year, got put on IR and with the Titans. And then they also added Hubbard, an offensive tackle who's played in the league for about a decade with the Steelers and I believe the Bengals and I think Tennessee last year.
Browns. Yeah, Browns, not Bengals.
Browns. Okay,
Same
yeah, Browns and Steelers. What'd you think of those? Are those is that something or is that nothing? Do you look at those moves as, man, those guys are just camp bodies, or do you think Hubbard actually competes with McKivitz? Do you think Brown actually makes the roster? What do you think of those two additions?
All things considered, with it being the middle of May, I actually am intrigued by these pickups. And I know it's NFL schedule release week. We finally get to take a look at the schedule, look at this roster, compile together a win-loss record for these teams, and actually talk about football. So when you have that on top of some roster moves, it gets the juices flowing a little bit after a couple of dead weeks following the NFL draft. But I have to be honest with you, I'm pretty intrigued by both of these signings here. Shakel Brown impressed the coaching staff so much during rookie minicamp as a second-year player that the Niners said to themselves, we need another look at this player. And you and I have talked about this a lot. I think that after the starters at defensive tackle for San Francisco with Malik Collins and Javon Hargrave, you brought in Jordan Elliott, you're a little bit thin at backup defensive tackle. Kalia Davis has never been able to stay healthy. Kevin Givens is a fringe roster type of player. And for Shakel Brown, he has a lot of intriguing athletic traits. He's 6'3", 295 pounds. In the pre-draft process coming out of Troy, he ran a sub-5 40-yard dash, 4.92. He's really strong with the upper body, 30 reps of 225 pounds on the bench press. That would have been one of the best marks at the combine this year. Undrafted last year, had a pretty solid training camp, but then he was placed on IR in August with an ankle injury. And as you noted in one of your tweets, he didn't start playing football until 11th grade. So I think this is a pretty intriguing depth option at defensive tackle for the Niners. And the more I think about this Chris Hubbard acquisition for San Francisco, the more I wonder, are they bringing him in to seriously compete with Colton McKivitz at right tackle? And I talked about this on the show today, that maybe the Niners have some surprising changes to the starting lineup in store along the offensive line, because as we know, Colton McKivitz really struggled last year. And Hubbard has been a 10-year veteran who's been in the league for a long time. He started a lot of games, 2014 to 2017 with Pittsburgh, had 14 starts with the Browns from 2018 to 2022, 34 starts. And then last year with Tennessee, 9 starts. He is coming off a torn triceps injury, which hit him on IR last year, but he's fully recovered from that. And his Pro Football Focus numbers, as far as the grades go, were actually better than Colton McKivitz. Overall grade of 69, pass blocking grade of 67.8, a run blocking grade of 64.1. I think Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch really like this, that he had no penalties last year. So if he is a backup option, you can count on him to come in. He's not going to be flustered in a hostile environment or be overwhelmed by having to step in as a backup option. He did give up 4 sacks, but the quarterback situation in Tennessee last year was not good. Will Levis finally taking over. 4 hits allowed, 18 pressures allowed, and that all came on 472 snaps at right tackle. But when you compare that with what Colton McKivitz did, Colton McKivitz also really struggled last year. And I just think that he's more of a swing tackle in this league, maybe an interior offensive lineman, but McKivitz had an overall Pro Football Focus grade of 65.1. Pass blocking grade was 56.4, run blocking grade of 68.1. He gave up 47 pressures, 9 sacks, and then 12 more pressures in 3 playoff games. So the more that I think about this, I know that it's a May acquisition. It's fallen under the radar for a lot of casuals out there, but it wouldn't shock me if Hubbard and McKivitz are sneakily competing to be the team starting right tackle in training camp.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of see it the same way. Hubbard to me looks more than just like a camp body. A buddy of mine's like, hey, Krug, is this guy a camp body? And I'm like, You know what? He looks a little bit better than that on paper, and maybe he'll give McKivitz a little bit of a run. If not take the job, maybe he'll at least challenge him and make McKivitz up his level of play. And then Shakel Brown. I mean, there's just when you can find guys who can move that well at that size. I think he's also more than a camp body, and it wouldn't shock me at all if he wound up pushing ahead of Kalia Davis and ahead of Kevin Givens and ahead of some of these other guys that right now we kind of think of as established. They might not be as established as we think. Let's talk about the offensive line for a second. What do you think the dream scenario is for the 5 across the line come week 1 against the Jets? I mean, if Shanahan could absolutely map it out and get things exactly the way he wants, who are the starters left to right on that O-line week 1?
So interesting. So this morning, out on my porch, I woke up early because I have to go pick up my new car. So I had to pull an early work day to get some shows together and get some content for the weekend. And sometimes in the morning when you're having the coffee, beautiful day, birds are chirping, that's when the creative wheels start to get going inside my brain, at least. And I know a lot of other people can relate with that. And I just started raffing, and I put together like 10 offensive line combinations that the Niners could go with. And I won't run through all of them here, but there's a bunch of different 5-man protections that San Francisco can go with the offensive line in 2024. And the one that I kind of like, and the left side of the line is not going to change. It's going to be Trent Williams at left tackle and Aaron Banks at left guard. But right. I think that we could see a couple of different options at center, right guard, and right tackle. You could either go with Jake Brendel, John Feliciano, Dominic Pooney, or Jarrett Kingston at center. But Drake Nugent got off to a really good start at rookie minicamp, and I like his athleticism. He was a first-team Big Ten player last year for the national champion winning Michigan Wolverines. He's got
just looking at him, and just looking at him, by the way, he is really, really wide.
Yeah.
I mean, he's short. He's 6'1" and change. But Chase, this guy is, if the average offensive lineman is, certain width, this guy's broader than your average offensive lineman. He's really a wide body.
Yeah. And I know that you had Dieter Kurtenball of the Mercury News on your show on Thursday night. And in his column, he said, if you're thinking about a similar body type, Jason Kelce. Now, Jason Kelce is shorter. He was lighter in the pre-draft process. He was well under 300 pounds, and he ran like a sub 4.9 40-yard dash. Drake Nugent has that similar build. He's not as fast as Jason Kelce. So I'm not comparing the two, but body type wise, that'll kind of get people thinking what he could bring to the table as far as the frame. He did run like a 5.25 40-yard dash in the pre-draft process, but at nearly 300 pounds, that's pretty good. Now, he did struggle against some stronger interior defensive linemen at the college level, but he started every game for Michigan and was a first-team Big Ten player in a conference where there are really good offensive linemen, because think about where they're recruiting in the Big Ten. A lot of that in the Midwest. You have a lot of wrestlers and farm boys in the Midwest. I used to work out there. And then in turn, defensively, there are a lot of really good defensive tackles. So those are all the options that could start at center. And starting at right guard, depending on what you do at center, there are also multiple options there. You could start Dominic Pooney. You could start Jarrett Kingston. You could start John Feliciano. You could start Spencer Burford. He's still a really young player. He's in his early 20s. He came out of the draft 2 years ago out of UTSA as a really young prospect. And then at right tackle, it's the big question. McKivitz. You could go with Chris Hubbard. I don't think that Brandon Parker is a starting caliber tackle in this league. He's been terrible for the Las Vegas Raiders, even though he was like a 3rd-round pick a couple of years ago. And on top of that, he struggled to stay healthy. You would know because you were at rookie minicamp. I don't know if Dominic Pooney can play right tackle. He primarily played left tackle in college, and last year he was one of 3 offensive tackles in college football to play 700-plus snaps and not give up a sack. Jarrett Kingston also played left tackle and didn't give up a sack, but they have shorter arms. McKivitz has shorter arms as well, but there are a couple of different options at right tackle too. So to answer your question, the combination that I kind of like is Trent Williams at left tackle, Aaron Banks at left guard, John Feliciano or Drake Nugent at center, And if it's Nugent at center, you go Feliciano right guard or Dominic Puni at right guard. You could go Feliciano at center, Puni at right guard, and then maybe Chris Hubbard or Colton McKivitz at right tackle. It's going to be fascinating to see how the Niners see that positional group in training camp, I think.
Yeah, no, Nugent, and also it'll be interesting to see, because I think they really defer to Chris Forster, the O-line coach.
Yeah.
And I guess Forster pretty much handpicked a lot of these guys as far as he really liked Puni. He really liked Kingston. They deferred to him with a lot of these offensive line picks because they really believe in his ability to find guys that fit his scheme and the scheme they want to run, the outside zone. It is interesting to see, like, will they try to go continuity based because Jake Brendel was a Pro Bowl alternate 2 years ago and did start in the Super Bowl last year. Do they kind of look at it that way and say, hey, you know what, we're going with the incumbents until we fall on our face? Or do they look at this and say, you know what, Nugent looks like the guy who could be a plug and play, even though he's undrafted. He might be a plug and play center for us going forward. He was Stanford's team captain for 3 years before he transferred to Michigan. Very smart, very tough. And you're right. He went up against Johnny Newton and Michael Hall and all these guys in the Big Ten. He struggled with them at times, but Nugent's definitely got the width and the smarts and the tenacity. And then there's Puni, who played center during the Senior Bowl week and really did a great job against Michael Hall. And a lot of people feel like Puni might be a center, but then I asked him when he was here, he said he thinks of himself more as a guy who's played tackle, but is going to play guard. And I just see him as a guy who's definitely an upgrade on the guys that they have. So, I mean, if it was me, I think I would go Williams, Banks, Nugent, Puni, and McKivitz, and let Feliciano, Brendel, Burford, let those guys play off the bench. Maybe Shakel, I'm not really sure. Maybe Hubbard. I'd have to see more of Hubbard, but I'd be in favor of some lineup switches to go with some more youth and to try to upgrade, because I just think that their offensive line, especially in the interior, they were like fourth worst in the NFL grading out in the interior of their offensive line. They're going to have to be better than that if they want to win this ring. I really believe that.
Yeah, and I said after the Super Bowl this year, after the NFC Championship game last year, after the NFC Championship game against the Rams a couple of years ago, like, the Niners have to start prioritizing the offensive line a little bit better. And until they do, you're going up against some really fierce defensive lines who are built in the trenches, because that's what it requires to make deep playoff runs, to be a playoff team, is to be built well offensively and defensively in the trenches. And the Niners have prioritized the defensive line to their credit. They've invested, they've been aggressive, trades, free agency, draft, of building up that unit. They paid Trent Williams. Great. Other than that, they've been pretty cost efficient and cheap along the offensive line. I think it's cost them. The interesting domino is John Feliciano, because he comes back on a 1-year deal. And last year, he was one of the higher graded guards in football. Now, I like his versatility as a player, as a backup, because when Aaron Banks had the turf toe, he filled in. 2 years ago, he was the starting center for the New York Giants. Last year, when he had to play right guard, he played really, really well and graded out really well. So when you have a player of that caliber, do you want to keep him on the bench? But then you're looking at these rookies and you're like, damn, Dominic Puni's kind of got that dog to him, got some good athleticism. He can get out on pull blocks. Do we want to start grooming him? I fear that the Niners run it back just because of continuity's sake. And they go with the same offensive line again in saying, look at what we did last year. We were the number 1 overall offense in the National Football League. But you look at some of the in-depth numbers: pass protection, run blocking, pass protection win rate, run block win rate. They just didn't grade out well. I think what you got to do, not go with continuity for continuity's sake, go with the best players and at least see what a change along the offensive line could do for you, because the last couple of years that unit just simply has not been good enough.
Yeah, no, I mean, they have to be better. They have to be better on that offensive line.